Welcome back to the Marvel Movie Minute, a daily podcast in which we assemble to explore the films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe 1 minute at a time. In this, our 6th season, we're looking at the Avengers. I'm Andy Nelson from the Next Reel Film Podcast.
And I'm Pete Wright. Glorious, not lengthy? Yeah, I've been called worse.
Today we're talking about minute 31, which begins with the meager might of Earth and ends with the Other's Concession. Pete, it is just you and me today talking about minute 31. We're going to dig in and chat about the Other and Loki and Sanctuary and space and all sorts of things.
What else will we talk about, Andy? Oh, that seems like too much for us.
So I don't. This may be the longest episode we've had. I feel like this might be like 2.5 hour commentary on the film. There
are only 7 lines in this movie, Andy. Let's see if we can undersell that a little bit more.
First off, in the last minute, we were talking about the weird composition of the shot of Loki as he arrives in Sanctuary and the Other standing in the distance behind a rock outcropping in a way where it looked like just the top half of his body.
Yes.
And then Loki's astral projection or whatever projection of himself appears in like his regal form with his, outfit and everything.
Right.
And he looks like he makes the Other look like a Jawa. Like the Other all of a sudden looks like half of a Jawa. Like really
that's right. It's a real Frodo Gandalf relationship they've got. It totally is. Yeah.
Yeah. And then in this minute, right at the beginning, it was right at the end of the last minute, the beginning of this minute, it cuts to this alternate angle. And we see that this is where we can identify, there's a rock outcropping there. I couldn't tell that from all this blue, darkly lit scene in that other shot. But yes, there's a rock outcropping. And this is where the two of them have this conversation. This is such a cinematic tool. Let's have you two have a conversation while you're both walking in opposite directions, not looking at each other.
Yes, because they're doing the real, they're like circling, right? This is a power move walk, Like
yeah.
you might see this in, I don't know, a Fast and the Furious movie, for example. I don't know. It just feels like a power move thing. And the question is, do you take any of it seriously? Because the last time we were here at this place with these people, you and I lampooned it pretty hard.
Well, and here's the thing. It's so hard not to, because the beginning of this minute, we have Loki walking right to left, the Other walking left to right. The Other, as he walks, moves farther and farther behind this outcropping to the point where he's pretty much gone from behind this outcropping. It's like a weird thing, like almost like, is he designing it in a way where if Loki turns around and the Other doesn't say anything, is Loki going to go, wait, where'd you go? Where'd you go?
Yeah, because he's about to do like the Marx Brothers, like walking downstairs bit, like they do.
Right.
That's kind of what I feel like he's about to do. It's so silly. Like he hides in the rocks.
It's a strange thing. Like, yeah, and he's so short that it just makes it look like this whole thing is weirdly intentional so that we have this moment. Because then it all boils down to this moment where Loki pushes him a little too far with what he's saying. Loki says, if your force is as formidable as you claim. And that gives the Other this moment and a chance for Loki to clear the shot, right?
Yeah.
So that the camera can come around. And then we have this moment where the Other leans into the rocket outcropping and kind of leans toward camera and has this like snarky response to Loki. You question us? You question him?
Yeah.
I really, really enjoy what the writer is doing with the conversations, the scenes we have between our protagonists so far, between our team we're building. We have had some fantastic conversations, some witty banter, some funny moments. It's when we get to these moments with Loki and the Other standing here in this weirdly very comic booky location that I end up really struggling with a lot of the moments with this film.
Yes, I think that's true. And you just said it, really comic booky. I think the choices they made to ground the rest of this movie were so good that it makes it a jarring transition to come to this place. right? To this floating place with stairs and everything like that. And I know we've seen it before. But that doesn't make it easier to ground because it is in context of this incredibly grounded movie. Now, I don't know that I necessarily have a solution for what they would have done to ground this place and make it feel like it would fit. Is there anything they could have done to put this into the context of the rest of the Avengers and have it satisfying to you?
I mean, we had seen situations like this in Asgard, right?
That's a great point. You spent a lot of time there.
Yeah, and where they are, looking out, and it looks like, and the way that Asgard is designed, when we see, it's the underside, and then it flips over, and we see, it's a whole city up here on the top side of this location where we're filming this part of the story. But it's set up where these characters are gods.
Yeah.
Now they're deities in some aspect, and a lot of it still doesn't make a ton of sense. Like when they ride out to the Rainbow Bridge, that bridge takes them farther and farther out, where all the blue sky kind of fades away until it's just stars and nebula and quasars and God only knows what other space things that they wanted to throw out there.
Yeah.
But we have this sense that they're kind of on the edge of things, but it's okay because they're gods. Like, that's kind of the sense that I got from that film. And even at the very end of the film, again, it doesn't make a lick of sense, but we have them dangling off the edge of this broken rainbow bridge, and Loki is holding on to Thor's arm, who's holding on to Odin, and then Loki is just like, screw this, I'm going to take my chances out in space, and let's go, and falls and drifts out into who knows where. Apparently there's a wormhole and he ends up in Sanctuary, but still, I guess he's a god, so it's okay, is kind of the way that this whole thing ends up playing out. And this is where Marvel stories get very complicated, because we end up gaining an understanding from the characters that these gods aren't actually gods. They're just beings of a different kind, a different race, that live much longer, that have much healthier life expectancies.
They're generally healthier, cardiac performance.
Yeah, right.
Very strong.
Well, yeah. I've seen Thor, Love and Thunder. Hemsworth's looking pretty healthy to me. The whole thing is like, they just have this idea that we might have seen them as gods when they came to Earth. And this is kind of how it's set up in Thor. Back in Norway, when they had come down long, long ago, we thought they were gods because they came down from the sky, because they could do these things that we couldn't. The film kind of sets it up as, you know what, they're not actually gods. They're just, powerful beings. And now we get to these things where it's like, you know what, it doesn't really matter. If they're in space, it's all comic book superhero fantasy anyway. And so now, I guess, when it comes to Infinity War, I end up having an easier time buying into that planet where they end up on, where they're fighting Thanos toward the end of the film, and we have Iron Man and Spider-Man and Doctor Strange and Peter Quill, and they're all battling there, because it seems a little bigger, even though at the same time it kind of seems like an extension of this. But here, I mean, it really feels like we're on an asteroid in space. Like, it literally feels
That's exactly what it feels like.
Yeah, it just, and I have such a hard time parsing that as a place that makes sense for beings to be. And I guess I end up having to write it off.
Yeah, that's exactly my place with it too, that it feels like such an add-on, such an appendix, an unnecessary location for this movie that is, for the rest of the movie, has a context that demands something different. And I think your description of how that stuff is used in Thor is really right on, because we already have the expectation that they're gods living in a fantasy location. The rest of this movie takes place like in New Mexico, right? Like, it's so grounded. It's so very grounded in what we already know, that I think these just maybe it would be better if there was a bigger commitment to other spacey locations in this movie. Maybe if more of the movie was set in a bigger, like, more extravagant location, we would be okay with it, because it would not feel like a set of floating space stairs. And that's the thing. It's comical every time I see it. That doesn't help Loki's case. right?
Well, and I guess it's easy to forgive Loki because I know he was there, but from our sense of where he is right now, he still is on Earth. He's just kind of astrally projecting himself here. So, I mean, there's a little flexibility there, but still.
I guess what I'm thinking of is the substance of his character, right? Like, it's more about the substance of who he is that I think it becomes like the degree to which we're able to take him seriously is the degree to which we are okay with the fact that occasionally he zaps to this space floating stairs thing and puts on the big horns, and it all just looks so comic booky, so fast. It's a hard left turn from what he's doing, which is acting as an overlord and mind control agent for humans in an underground bunker with lots of wires and cables and things, which is as grounded as you get.
Right. It is tricky, and I struggle with it. And I mean, Thanos is clearly hanging out here too. The Other, who interestingly is actually scripted as a Chitauri, although it's not mentioned as such in the wiki. So it makes me wonder, was he meant to be a Chitauri? Because he doesn't quite seem Chitauri-ish. He's talking. He doesn't have the same face structure. He's got that weird sixth finger, that extra thumb. I just want to call him Count Rugen.
Oh, I dig that finger. You bet I do. Glorious, not lengthy. Was that weird? Did I make it weird just now?
It just a little weird. I'm going to put in a really long pause there. I don't know. I guess the space stuff is what it is. I guess we just have to accept it. The problem, I guess, I end up really having with this scene is it's dark, it's weirdly lit in ways where, like we were just talking about in the last minute, why does the Other look like it's just half of a body floating here? Until this shot when we go, oh, there's a rock there. It's like, I couldn't see a rock in the last shot. Why does it look so strange? I don't understand that. Then we have this moment here where as they're talking, like Loki is standing and there's like clearly a big red planet behind him at one point. And I'm like, how close are they to other things? Like, are they actually in orbit around this planet? Might they fall into this planet? Like, exactly what's going on here? I don't have a good sense. And then, I mean, actually that's one planet, but then exactly on the opposite side as we're looking at the Other, there's another planet there. So maybe it's just in this gravitational battle between these two planets, and that's why it all just floats here so perfectly.
Feels very astrologically dangerous. It's fragile. Everything's very fragile.
Yeah, very strange, very strange. One of the lines in here that the Other drops, I'm curious your take on it. He who put the scepter in your hand.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a metaphorical putting the scepter in your hand? Because, I mean, I'll tell you, the hand at the beginning, putting the scepter into Loki's hand does not look like Thanos.
No, it was the Other, right? Like, it was the Other. Did we see the extra finger? I don't know that we saw the extra finger.
That's what I was about to say. It's like, I need to go back and check now because we definitely don't see big purple arms. It looked like blue arms, which made me think that it was
a Chitauri.
The Other. But now I'm going back to that minute.
You're doing it right now. You're doing a little real time.
I'm doing a little real time scrub. It's lit in such a way, and the scepter is positioned in such a way where it's just a five-handed, because I was like, the scepter's covering up if there's a sixth finger, but then when he pulls it away, it is somebody with five hands.
It's actually somebody with six fingers, and each finger has a hand on it. It's amazing.
It's a bloomin' onion of fingers and hands here in this minute.
Funny.
No, it is just a five-fingered man. So it is not Count Rugen passing the scepter to Loki.
Okay. Good. I guess that's good to know.
But so it's definitely a metaphorical passing of the scepter, though.
Yes.
Right? Because it's like, it clearly does not in any way feel like big purple arms. I mean, I've seen Thanos in later movies. He's pretty big and his arms are pretty purple.
Does not look anything like what we are seeing here.
No.
So
it doesn't look like the Other's arms. You're right.
So that line then specifically, he who say it again. He who
put the scepter in your hand,
who gave you ancient knowledge and new purpose when you were cast out, defeated. So you question us, you question him. He who put the scepter in your hand. Yeah, I mean, I guess I guess it reads as kind of a weird battle of wills, especially since the other is acting only as a messenger for Thanos at this point.
Right, right.
I don't know. I guess I don't mind it because we do get the more important angle is the call is the response, and that's Loki's, which is I was king, and I think this drives his motivation right here for doing all of this, for getting into this misbegotten arrangement with the Chitauri and with Thanos. My assumption is, I'll finish this thought. That he is motivated to do this as a way to turn the shiv on Thor, on Asgard, on his relationship with them. Like he's the evildoer now. He's the family member that has fallen from grace,
and he's going to get to be king.
And he's going to get to be king.
Midgard. Right.
Yep. Question for you though. At this point, it reads as if Loki knows he's dealing with Thanos. Is that your read on it?
Yeah, I thought it feels like he knows, and it's a good question. I mean, obviously, I feel like he must know because the way that the other is talking, you question him,
yeah,
right? It's like there's this big thing as to like this other being that we're not talking about now, but he's somebody that we're all kind of hinting at here in this film. It very much feels like they're kind of hinting at the fact that it is Thanos. But yeah, I guess there are still questions about that and questions about what Loki knows of him and if Loki is actually willing to kind of betray him or if he thinks he can get away with anything,
Yeah, that is, I think, my central question at this point in their relationship is, does he think less of Thanos than he should be thinking of Thanos? Does my hunch is we are supposed to believe that Loki might know that it's Thanos he's dealing with, but does not know of Thanos' ultimate objective. And that's why he's okay going into this sort of devil's bargain.
Yeah, and I think to a certain extent, this whole conversation really wipes out any possible thinking that there was a chance that the other and or Thanos had put Loki under some sort of mind control. I know we've talked about that in past minutes about how that was kind of in one thing on the wiki as far as how they were kind of getting him to do these things. And we thought, well, maybe that makes sense then why they're letting him take this Infinity Stone in a scepter to go to Earth to get this other Infinity Stone for them. But the way that it reads, Loki is in control of himself and is perfectly fine having this animosity with the other and kind of these conversations where they're a little bit at odds, even though they're both kind of agreeing to, go through the process of this whole attack.
Agreed.
So I don't know. It all boils down to the fact, I suppose, that they were trying to cover up that Thanos is the actual bad guy. And we don't get that reveal till the very end of this. And so this whole thing feels like we're dancing around a setup that we want to hint at over the course of this film, but we aren't necessarily going to give you all the pieces until the very end. And sometimes it makes it feel like, does it take away some of Loki's agency when it seems like he's just answering to somebody else?
Yeah. And this is a chance maybe for us to see that Loki, while we believe he's answering to somebody else because of the weird pre credits thing that we saw at the beginning of the movie, the pre-movie movie, that actually Loki has more agency than we expect. I was a king. Like I'm using you to get what I want. So at this point, to our inexperienced eyes, he's in control. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think so. The whole thing plays really interesting. I mean, there's definitely some lines I still want to talk about, but there's a shot in here as these two people are kind of moving around and having this conversation where Loki walks a little bit away and he glances to his right and to this weird vertebra-looking staircase, right? He looks at the staircase and we cut to it. We cut to this staircase and the camera kind of tilts up to reveal it spiraling up and away. And then it cuts to, and then the other, that's when Loki ends up delivering his line that really pisses the because that's when he says, "You don't have the Tesseract yet," which pisses the other off, and the other reveals that he can run really fast as he zips over to him. It's a weird shot because we're getting again this weird staircase in space, and I guess again this is another hint that hey, there is this other person that we're also dealing with. These moments play throughout these scenes with these two that just feel like they were trying to hide a lot of this detail in ways where, like, and I don't know, maybe it's just the shot construction where I really struggle. It's like, because for a while I'm like, why are we getting this shot of the staircase suddenly? Like, it's just cut to randomly. And I guess, Loki looks at it, but it's just, I don't know. The whole thing feels constructed, like very scripted in a way to just kind of deliver us these points. Like, we got to make sure we're mentioning that there's this other person who's leading them. I mean, I don't know. Does it all end up feeling clunky to you?
Well, yeah, but I don't know that I can say any more than we've already said about that particular clunkiness. I do think it's interesting once again, and part of why I think it's we're leaning in on the clunky part is this line in particular. You don't have the Tesseract yet, but this goes back to the potential confusion of the blue pew pew goo energy that is both now in the spear and the thing that they're looking for, and how confused it feels to me that, there is a part of me that still thinks they misunderstand what is in Loki's scepter.
Yeah.
It's just messy. It's just messy. And maybe it's as easy as just like, why didn't they recolor some stuff?
Well, and when you say they misunderstand, you're talking about the filmmakers, not necessarily the Other and Thanos. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that is an issue, and it's going to perpetually be a struggle with this because it just feels so strange that they chose to do this, knowing that they obviously are building a story with Thanos. They're obviously including this stone in this scepter, and eventually are going to have to change its color. It's like they obviously knew that, but I feel like they chose to go blue because they very specifically needed to do this whole thing with the Tesseract and opening this doorway through space so that Loki could come through at the start of the film. And so I'm guessing they felt, you know what, let's make it blue on both ends because it will make the audience feel like, oh, there's some connection with the blue that's going to allow things to open up and pull him through.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right. But I do think they introduced Thanos. They knew where, by this point in phase one and the phase one through, 3, 4, whatever, they knew in the Infinity Saga that this is where they were going. And I think it was a short-sighted production choice to do that on the effects side rather than recolor to actually allow us to put some pieces together that right now we can't.
Well, okay, so now here's an interesting question that I want to pose to you. I have not heard any talk of this, but would you be open to the Marvel company opening up the can to all of these past films doing kind of what George Lucas did and going through and fixing little things like that? Like, okay, let's go into the Avengers and Ultron and any film where the scepter is, and we are going to now make it yellow.
Yeah. Andy,
am I opening a bad can of worms?
I feel like you just outed yourself as a Luke head. And
Luke head?
I worry about what that's going to do to your reputation until you come out hard against it, right? Like,
what do you think? The whole beginning where Eric was like, yes, my master has returned. I just want that shot in here so badly. Or just have Stellan Skarsgård just ADR a line. We don't even need to shoot it again. Just throw it in there randomly while we're looking at something else.
That is amazing. But it does go to the question for you. What do you think about that? Do you think that's an appropriate thing to do?
I get that at the time they were probably trying to find ways to just make the story a little more clean for audiences. If it's small fixes like that, I mean, many filmmakers have gone back after the fact to tweak their films. I mean, Michael Mann has gone in and he loves playing with films. There's plenty of films out there that are director's cuts. Why is this a particular franchise that has never gone in to do director's cuts of any kind. Like, wouldn't it be interesting to, for example, this film, give it a little extra padding, flesh out some of those Captain America sequences where we get a little more backstory of the character, things like that could allow for a little more story. And I don't know where the thinking is with that, but I'm always open to it. But here's the caveat that I always throw out with these sorts of things. Always keep the other version available. And that's, I think, one of the things that, we talked about the original Star Wars trilogy over on the next reel, and we looked at the Harmy special edition because we wanted to talk about the films as close to what they originally looked like at the time of their release.
Right.
And I think that's something that I don't understand why Lucas and now Disney, they won't release those original versions of the Star Wars trilogy, because it's like, give people that chance to have that and then still keep these other ones out there. Like,
yeah,
there's no issue with changing it. I don't find any issue with that as long as you keep the original available.
I think that's the trick. I guess with regard to this movie, we've come up with a few things that we would like to have fixed. Some of them are irrational. Aren't going to be fixed. And the stuff like the color of the scepter might be too small of a fix. And I worry about, especially as intertwined as this movie is to the overall Infinity Saga, that starting to muck around on too much is pushing over one too many dominoes. I don't actually mind this movie. This isn't a movie that demands significant recuts, but when we run into these kinds of choices, it's puzzling. It's just puzzling. I don't get it. I don't love it, but and I don't think it's necessarily good for the Infinity Saga to start with something that's so confusing and has to be explained later. But I don't know that this is the thing that's going to push over the edge to say, oh, we need a director's cut.
I would be okay with them doing that, just because it does feel like some of these early stories, they hadn't quite figured things out, and they were making choices probably a little more haphazardly because they're like, oh, we'll figure that out down the road. And then they kind of come back and it's like, oh, yeah, we never really did kind of deal with that color change with the scepter or whatever the case may be. But it's just one of those things. It can be a little frustrating, but
it is. Yeah, no, I get it.
What do you get? Okay, two questions regarding a couple lines. The Other says to Loki, when he's talking about Thanos, he says, "He who put the scepter in your hand, who gave you ancient knowledge and new purpose." I mean, we know what the new purpose is, but did ancient knowledge ever come up in anything?
I have no idea what ancient knowledge is. None. What is ancient knowledge?
I don't know. I was trying to figure out, is there something in the Loki TV show about something that happened with Loki where he just seems to know more than he had? And
what?
I don't know. I know. I'm just guessing. I can't remember. I'm speculating. Is there something somewhere? I guess we'll have to let our listeners tell us if there's something that we're forgetting that showed some form of ancient knowledge, because otherwise it just feels like a scripted line to throw in here.
It sure does. That is a really confusing thing you just planted there. Do we have to go watch all of Loki again? Maybe we do.
I don't know. I just am so curious. Like, what does that line mean?
Yeah.
And then the other line that piques my curiosity, again, spoken by the Other, which I love after Loki's complaining about not getting to be king anymore. Wah! And the Other's like, your ambition is little, full of childish need. Just like, that's a great dig. But then what he says, we look beyond the earth to greater worlds the Tesseract will unveil.
Okay.
Now, it never unveils greater worlds. I mean, I guess it does to a certain extent. Like, obviously, when Red Skull grabs it in the last film, it like opens up space and he gets blue beamed out of there.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't know, is that a greater world? I was trying to figure out, like, is there some capacity where they intend to use the Tesseract to find a particular place? And I was like, God, it would have been nice to see them using that in some way to like find Vormir or something.
Yeah, right. That's actually a really interesting note. It feels like a thing that they didn't. It feels like a thing they didn't finish. But again, it could also just be a thing that didn't play for the story and just plays for awesome lines.
But they're awesome, but also I can't help but feel like I really just don't like the Other. Like, this character, I think, has so many lines that I just end up getting frustrated with. His look, like the whole element of him in this story is designed just to shadow or put shadow over Thanos. And I can't help but feel like I wish The Other had been written better so that I actually found him to be a more interesting character, like Ebony Maw and some of the other characters helping Thanos that we meet later in the franchise.
Yeah, I don't disagree. It's just yet another example of we need a minion. We need a minion, and this is the one, you know?
Yeah. That's pretty much what we get. We get this odd minion who, at the end, concedes to Thanos, or concedes to Loki, and that's the end of our minute. It's not my favorite minute of the film, but it certainly is an interesting one to talk about because I think it opens a lot of conversational holes that take us in all sorts of different directions, as we saw in this minute.
Yes, indeed.
All right. Well, let's wrap it up. We'll be back tomorrow to talk about minute 32. We'll finish this up and, we'll get to talk a little bit more about, I don't know, maybe a helicarrier or something. I guess we'll see.
Helicarrier. Do go on.
All right. Well, that's it. Remember, you can go to marvelmovieminute.com. You can find our socials there. You can learn about memberships. You can get access to access to episodes early, ad-free, plus hiatus episodes that we release between seasons, all that good stuff. So that's it. So, Pete, thanks as always.
You will have your cake, podcaster.
Until next time, true believers.
Marvel Movie Minute is a production of True Story FM, engineering by Andy Nelson. This season's music is Message to the World by Anthony Vega, and this season's show art is by Winston Yabo. Find the show at truestory.fm. If your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, please consider doing that for our show.